Vasyl Lomachenko, the great Vasyl Lomachenko, announces his retirement from boxing at the age of 37. Raheem is on his route, on his way. He is en route to a Beyonce concert, but we had to talk about Lomachenko retiring first, Raheem. Man,
Yeah, thanks, Sean. They're not going to have their fun with that one in the comments. Listen, I'm here for Queen Bey. Don't even come for me in the comments. The Queen is here. The real Queen of England has arrived, and I'm showing up to pay homage. Go ahead, Sean.
we'll see what happened was everybody thought Lomachenko would go for the money for the Gervonta Davis fight, and what Vasyl said was, "You must not know about me." Okay, that's what he did. Anyway, he didn't go for the money. He retires and probably leaves a little something left in the tank on the table. But Lomachenko walks away from boxing, and I'll give my a couple quick things I want to talk about for Loma, and then you go ahead and cook, Raheem. Um, so he evolutionized. I can't say revolutionized because Leon Spinks fought Muhammad Ali 7 fights into his pro career for the heavyweight title, but he evolutionized the way fighters are moved if they have a decorated amateur career. If they have a bunch of hundreds of amateur fights, his claim to fame, his major accomplishment in professional boxing is that he's the fighter with the fewest amount of fights to become world champion. He's the fighter with the fewest amount of fights to become a two-division world champion. He's the fighter in boxing history with the fewest amount of fights to become three-division world champion. And I think some of the highlights of Lomachenko was his style. He became in the American mainstream conscious before Alexander Usyk, so he showed us that style that Usyk learned a lot from Anatoly Lomachenko, his father. They engineered their own brand of fighting, and I know a lot of it comes from the Ukrainian Eastern European school, but that style is the Lomachenko and the Usyk now, but that's the Loma style. His peak was certainly 130 pounds, where he made 4 straight fighters retire on the stool, including Nicholas Walters and Guillermo Rigondeaux. He has big wins against Jorge Linares, Rigondeaux, who I just mentioned. And Rigondeaux, before you say Rigondeaux was really too small, of course he was too small, but there was a lot of hype around that fight from boxing fans demanding that Lomachenko fight Rigondeaux. And so when he dominated him, yes, he dominated a fighter that was older and coming up 2 weight classes, but it was asked and he fulfilled it. Made Walters quit, Linares. Gary Russell was the first title win he had. Gary Russell went on to have a very excellent career himself as WBC champ. But all that said, and I do think Lomachenko is certainly a Hall of Famer. All that said, there's other people who will point and say he lost his biggest fights to Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney. A lot of the rhetoric from Bob Arum when I'll never forget being at Madison Square Garden after he knocked out Linares and Bob Arum going up on the stage and saying, he's the greatest fighter since Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard. And Raheem nudging me, in the post-fight press conference, like, see, that's the bullshit. There's the bullshit. And so like so many times, the truth lies in the middle. If you let Bob Arum at the time and Lomachenko's most ardent supporters tell it, he's 50-50 with Floyd Mayweather, as Dan Rafael once said at 130 pounds. He's pound for pound, he's one of the greatest fighters of all time. But if you let his detractors tell it, he's a European hype job who really lost his biggest fights to Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney. The truth is in the middle. He is a great fighter. He is a Hall of Fame fighter. He will make the Hall of Fame. Him at 130 pounds in hypotheticals against Marquez and Pacquiao, Morales and Barrera, those are fun hypotheticals that aren't blasphemous. So the truth is in the middle. He was a great fighter, not one of the greatest fighters of all time, but in his day, a special super featherweight and a great fighter who accomplished things other guys haven't in the pros. What do you think, Raheem?
You listed all the things that he is. And I guess now we have to say was, in the best way possible was, and that he's still on the planet. He's still living and breathing and is going to be able to contribute to the sport in whichever way he decides. But he is retired on his own volition. No one retired Lomachenko. Lomachenko retired. And he said, you know, he was the fastest to do this and the first to do that and the quickest to do this.
In the
Another thing
four
that he
belt
was the
era,
fast,
in the four belt era, where that's not what it once was. Right, right.
but another thing he was the fastest at was learning what this sport of boxing is all about. Because let's not forget the head of steam he came out of that amateur pedigree with into his pro career. They wanted to put him in straight away for a world title. And all that nonsense that Bob Arum was talking and all this hype that was coming from this guy as an amateur who was just going to immediately steamroll through the pro division. He got a welcome to boxing from Orlando Salido. This is not a shot at Lomachenko. In fact, it's credit to him because let me tell you something else, Sean. When I first encountered Vasyl Lomachenko, he was quite the dickhead. He really was a pain in the ass to talk to interview, to try to get time with. And I mean, before he even had a pro fight,
Right.
when he was building up to the Orlando Salido fight, he acted like, I mean, I really don't even know who I could compare him to. He was like Floyd on his worst day. And it was
And
so
Raheem, let me just
annoying.
interject before everybody wants to get at Raheem and kill Raheem. Lomachenko said heading into the Haney fight when he reflected on his loss to Teofimo Lopez, I was arrogant. And he said he recentered
Oh,
himself with his faith, but he admitted he was an arrogant man once upon
yeah,
a
look,
time.
Sean, I know the daggers are out, but I know where I'm headed with this.
Right,
You understand?
right, right.
This guy, when I had that experience with him 2 days before the Salido fight, I just shook my head and I graciously let him dismiss me as just an annoyance. And I knew if not that Saturday night, one very soon he was going to find out what this business is really all about. And to his credit, he was humbled that night and also, I thought, showed his true character that night. These guys grow up in front of the public. They are thrown into adult professional situations with young minds that are still being shaped. Yes, his boxing acumen, his ability as an amateur, his success, and all of his culture coming from his country. Yeah, sure, he was a great young athlete, but it doesn't mean at that point he was a mature young man. And that experience matured him as an athlete and also matured him as a man. And I watched that happen. I'm not going to say that immediately he was a joy to be around, but I did see a change. I did notice that he noticed that this shit ain't what he thought it was going to be. And so when that officially and first happened, that again, Salido, it's not like he, outboxed Lomachenko. It's not like he took the credentials that the young man had as an exceptional amateur away from him. He showed him how this shit can really go, even if you're not as good as Lomachenko. If you know how boxing works, if you know what you can get away with, if you can turn that crowd and do all the little things that are legal or not legal, and just do it just enough not to get DQ'd and get the crowd hyped and still get the decision, even though you're the B side, big time B side, major underdog. That was his introduction to this sport. And I think his retirement now has come full circle because, what you said he didn't want to do was go for the money. It ain't about the money, Sean. What he didn't want to do is go for the Triple G. Once he got delusioned and disillusioned about what boxing is, the business of boxing, his first lesson coming from Salido, and his most recent lesson in his mind coming from Haney, that this is not a fair playing field. I won't get a fair shake, that all of this boxing business behind the scenes is not what I want to be spending my time thinking about and spending my life trying to navigate. Yes, I think he is an exceptional athlete. No, he is not necessarily one of the all-time greats. There's a lot of people ahead of him in that conversation, but he was a phenomenal spectacle in his flash and his time. But what he isn't, I don't think, is somebody who only has passion for boxing. I think this is become a burden for him, a heavy lift, too much more than he wants to have to deal with. And I think the same thing that can be said of Triple G, and Triple G carried on after that. And now his career just kind of fizzled out. And we don't really get to respect Triple G the way we should because he got jobbed against Canelo. He knows he got jobbed. It doesn't matter what we think or whether we believe he got jobbed. Ultimately, the record books are what they are. Canelo went on to do what he's done. And Triple G essentially got sidelined and his career somewhat fizzled. And if, like Marquez told me right before Pacquiao 4, He stole my life. That's what Marquez told me before Pacquiao 4. That's how Triple G felt after Canelo 2. He stole my life. And to watch this guy live the life you feel like you deserve, that you fought for, that you earned, that you have every right to live, is a burning pit in his stomach that can just eat you alive like cancer. So kudos to him. If he's too disgusted with the sport, not passionate about continuing to sacrifice and leave it up to the judges, because he's ultimately at this rate, at this age, going to probably leave it up to the judges. I don't think he's going to keep making guys quit. I don't think he's going to start knocking guys out. I think it's going to be what it is. And he's going to have to rely on the integrity of boxing to get the accolades, titles, and purses that he deserves. And who wants to make that bet, honestly, especially with the experiences that he's had and the way he sees them. So, yes, a fond farewell to Lomachenko. And you should really study not just what happened in the ring with him, because it was phenomenal. He did bring some excitement, and he was like a mosquito with a fucking a harpoon. You know what I mean? Like a guy who just you couldn't get rid of. He didn't stop guys because he hurt them. He stopped guys because he frustrated them so much that they just wanted to say no mas. They couldn't take it anymore. Mentally broke them down, and then also physically dominated them. And he used one or two or the combination of both to win those battles. That is what Lomachenko brought. That is what his legacy will be. And that is a damn difficult legacy to build. So kudos, credit to him. And I say one of his best wins was stopping when he did. This is a win. Him not going in there half-assed or half-hearted or bitter or disillusioned is a win, man. Credit to you, brother. Sit and watch Usyk try to finish his career the way you could have if boxing was a fair and even playing field for everyone.
Yeah, and it speaks volumes that he's Usyk's little big bro. If you and not to Usyk will be like, I'm not fucking with Lomachenko. That's big bro. That and so that speaks volumes of him coming from the heavyweight champ. The Salido fight was kind of a blessing in disguise because he got 25 professional fights of experience in one night at the cost of a loss, right? But at that moment forward, he was now ready. He got it all. He got it all under his belt in one 12-round fight. So, and again, just the style, the lead foot placement, the feints. I remember Max Kellerman telling Jim Lampley being like, "You really think this guy is going to be a star?" They were at the weigh-in for his first professional fight, and Max goes, "You got to see this guy's lead foot. You got to see this guy's feints." And Max wound up being right. Jim was questioning, will people really go on to appreciate such a nuanced part of his style? And they did. Those became the Lomachenko feints and everything.
But Jim is like me. I need to see it work against the best before I'm sure that it's something phenomenal I'm looking at.
Right. So I was Max in your Jim in that scenario. I'll take it, but
yeah. And it needs to be said also, I did let you know that after that Salido loss, he did find some humility, but it wasn't immediate. It wasn't complete. It was just like,
this was a gradual process.
And gradually, as his career continued and as our coverage of his career continued, he grew more fond of me personally, while he may not have grown any more fond of the necessity to do media or take interviews, or maybe didn't respect everybody equally, which you don't have to. At that point, you can start to determine who's coming to this sport and bringing something interesting to an interview and who's wasting your time. Every fighter has the ability and the right to do that, but I think I landed on the side of journalists that he thought were worthy of speaking to and opening up to and being honest with and taking a little extra time for. And we ultimately got there. And he gave me some gems over the course of these years. And we had some interesting exchanges. And he took some times when I knew he didn't want to do the interview. And I had to ask him questions that I knew were tough. And sometimes he rolled with them and sometimes he got offended, but he never ever really regressed into being that immature kind of little arrogant shit that he was when he first came into the sport. And in fact, he grew into be quite a man that I respect, and the kind of guy that every time I see him, we're smiles, it's a hug, it's a handshake, and we'll always have that kind of respect. I love watching these guys grow up. I love being alongside these legends and warriors and sometimes icons and sometimes like flashes of brilliance is what I would call Lomachenko, a flash of brilliance in the sport where I don't know how the annals of history will remember him but the fact that I have a firsthand memory of him is a real blessing and a gift.
Yeah, I witnessed the same growth from his first professional fight all the way to the end. We got to cover this guy throughout his whole career. Before we close on Loma, um, I think if he would have gotten the nod against Haney, what you just said, you don't know how history or but that would have been cemented. He would have been completely cemented. I covered that fight live at MGM. Live, I thought Lomachenko won. I thought that Haney's body work never accumulated into big hurting moments, and Lomachenko kind of took off and dominated the second half of the fight. I know he gave up the 12th. Anyways, live, I thought Loma won. Fights are scored differently in person and on television. On television, Haney was very busy and consistent to the body, and on television, I understood why Haney got the nod. But live in the arena, it was Lomachenko landing the head snapping punches, the eye catching blows. I thought he won. Who'd you think won that fight?
Listen, I say the way that Lomachenko felt about the fight, and apparently you agree with him. I wasn't in the arena. In fact, I was hosting a fight night for a private facility, Soho House in Austin. It was a fantastic event, and I was taking my ringside seat and turning it into some private dollars for myself. So unlike you, most of the time we're sitting right next to each other, but in this case, I had the on television experience, and I did think that Haney edged it. And I don't think that what people who believe he didn't win it are taking into account was the scoring body shots early in the fight that probably ringside weren't as exciting, didn't get the crowd going, but on television were a lot more pronounced. Mm-hmm. And then down the stretch, yes, of course, Lomachenko tightened up the fight and it was very close, but I had Haney edging it. But I also understand that Lomachenko could feel differently and feel jobbed by that. And if he had won that fight, I think we'd be talking about what happened in Tank versus Lomachenko. I think that fight would have been teed up after his win against Haney. I think, you know, a lot of things might have gone differently, which is why I use the Triple G analogy, where I do believe Triple G, in fact, did win the fight on television, ringside, and in and in every parallel universe you can imagine. So, you know, yeah, of course. And I thought the second fight was a draw. So I'm just like, you know, if he had gotten the nod in the first fight, there still would have been a rematch. He'd have held on to his belt. If he had gotten a draw in the second fight, he'd still held on to his belt. And the whole history would have been written differently. And I think correctly, we would have seen the right trajectory of both of those careers. However, just like we'll never know what might have happened had Lomachenko gotten that decision, although I did have Haney edging it, we'll never know what might have happened if Triple G had gotten the correct decisions. And that is one of the things that you have to just be able to swallow hard, no diddy, in boxing. And I think Lomachenko is just not ready to take that gut punch of swallowing one more what he would consider to be an injustice.
And it's also like, this is supposed to be your guys' era. He's a featherweight coming up because Lopez and Haney were naturally bigger fighters than him. And it's like, man, aren't you guys supposed to be fighting each other? Lopez, Haney, Tank, and and you guys want me to fight all of you before you fight each other? No, I'm out. I'm like point. Marvin Hagler going to Italy. I'm out.
Great point. Like Chocolatito, he had been fighting out of his weight class for quite some time and still successful. And, you know, like Chocolatito, I don't think he wanted to watch his career just wither and have to retire because the purses weren't there or because the guys were too big and the fights that people wanted to see were just not right and not fair for him. And as he got older and doesn't going to get any heavier because he ain't taking the needle, then, you know, where does it all end up? Take control, take the bull by the horns. If this ain't really your passion, it's not something that you absolutely have to do. You've done well with your money. You know, your big little bro is still undisputed champion. It's like, you know, take that ride and enjoy life, man. If you can, do it. It's a problem that these fighters can't do it because they can't enjoy life outside the ring and they stay too long. They keep chasing the dragon, trying to get that first high back, thinking that this time boxing will do
Manny
right,
Pacquiao.
And it doesn't fucking happen. Yeah, and Manny Pacquiao is different because you know, I don't think he was the victim of like bad decisions. In fact, I think he was the victim of some decisions that might have been able to go either way and went his way a few times. So, you know, I think he's the kind of opposite of the story. But to your point, it's just if you can let go on your own terms, by God, man, let go on your own terms. And that comes from a guy who's never, ever boxed as a professional or an amateur competitively. So clearly I don't have what it is that these guys have that make them want to get in their first place. Right. So I can't imagine what they need to have to make them get out. But me as a reasonably minded, competitive boxer, it all makes perfect sense. It's so easy to make that decision. And for him, I think one of his credits, one of the things that is intelligent about him beyond what is happening in the ring is that he can make rational decisions, not based on an addiction to the sport, but based on his quality of life. And maybe he's just determined that his quality of life at this point is not improved by continuing to box. So again, credit to him. I look forward to seeing him in person very soon and thanking him for all of his great nights of boxing and the wonderful times we've had. And hopefully he'll find a space in the sport where he can continue to contribute his perspective and we can hear what he thinks about these new fights that are being made without him having to feel the need to be a part of them inside the ropes.
Yeah, for me, again, the peak was Lomachenko, that 4 fight run at super featherweight where he made fighters all quit. But my favorite Lomachenko moment, ringside in my hometown of New York City. It's the first time I ever got to be ringside at the Garden. I got to cover fights at the Garden, but never ringside. I'm ringside. Lomachenko gets dropped by Linares. He gets up and knocks Linares out in his first fight at lightweight to become the lineal ring lightweight champion. And I knew I saw greatness that night. I knew I saw a special fight at the Garden, and that's actually one of my favorite moments covering fights because it was at the Garden and it was between a Hall of Famer and a lightweight champion, Linares. So salute to you, Lomachenko. Thank you, brother, for the fights and the time and the interviews and all that.